In 2012, Cyberpunk 2077 was first teased. The teaser showcased a short story of the Max Tack officer in what seemed like a futuristic sci-fi setting. No one had seen something as good looking as this at the time, and everyone was hyped for it. To be honest, I didn't even know about this until around 2016 when I played The Witcher 3 and became a fan of the studio. Once I saw the teaser, I was all up for it as well. But years went on by in silence, where CD Projekt Red refused to even talk about the game until the E3 2019. Finally, the game was properly revealed and the release was finalized to April 16, 2020. After 3 delays, a few controversies and some death threats, the game came out finally, and oh boy, what a mess. The game was in a very bad and unfinished state when it was released, filled with full bugs and glitches, had performance and optimization issues across all the platforms, had suffered from a lot of possible content cuts, and the worst of them all, the game kept crashing on all the platforms. It was quite frustrating, and this might just be the most frustrating and disappointing launch of any game in 2020. The game kept crashing so bad I almost gave up on it. I just stopped playing for the following 8 days without even finishing it. But fortunately, the hotfixes really improved the experience for me on the PlayStation 5, when I really got into a playable version of the game. I really actually fell in love with it. The story, the characters, and the aesthetics of the game kept me going on for hours and hours. So, let's talk about my experience with the most overhyped game of all time and find out if it lived up to that degree. A common trend that's going around now is comparing that Cyberpunk 2077 to GTA 5. True, the game has much resemblance to the Grand Theft Auto titles, especially the Grand Theft Auto 5. But Cyberpunk 2077 is not your typical Grand Theft Auto game. It is an RPG title that has a totally different approach to its open world, exploration, and the combat. To be honest, I have mixed feelings about the game's camera implementation. Yes, I get why the devs went for the first-person perspective rather than the third person. This creates an immersive RPG experience, and I'm not denying it. You can actually see the game's detail levels, and it's simply mind-blowing how even non-cutscenes scenes felt like there are cutscenes. But I really hoped they would have had a third-person mode as well. You get to create your own customized character V at the beginning of the game, but you rarely get to see them during the cutscene. A third-person mode would have fixed this issue for some extent, but seeing how bad it looks on recent mods by the PC community, I'm kinda glad that they didn't go for it. The only third-person mode you get in the game is when driving or riding a bike. Oh, and something extra that I will not mention due to the spoilers. Driving in the game is pretty underwhelming, to be honest. The experience is not mind-blowing, but nor it is bad. It's simply average, and definitely better than the Watch Dogs, of course. There are plenty of vehicles that come at the various performances and price levels. There are plenty of variations of some vehicles you can find in the game. Most of them look really unique and customized. And people will tell you when they have vehicle for sale. You can buy these vehicles and call them to your locations anytime you want. Just like you can summon a roach in The Witcher 3. You can't hijack any cars that you want, as the higher tier of the car requires higher physical attributes levels. But unless if you exploit the system by going in front of the car, shooting it once, NPCs runs out, leaving their vehicle behind, meaning you can get in and drive absolutely any vehicle you want. But if you lose that vehicle or leave it behind, you will not be able to recall it. Now, talking about the attributes, the game features a pretty decent skill tree. It features branches which you can upgrade, namely body, reflexes, technical ability, intelligence, and cool. Inside these main branches, you can find minor skills to fit your playstyle. For example, with the abilities in the cool branch, you can get perks related to stealth. And physical branch has perks that gives you physical strength, health regen, and max HP, and etc. The builds you can try out on this game are vast, and this is one of the main reasons it has such a great replayability value. I'll talk about the replayability at the end of this video. One thing I hated about the game is the AI. From the pedestrians to the cops and traffic, the AI was simply horrible. Pedestrians randomly disappear, cops randomly spawn to one-shot you if a crime is reported for the most ridiculous reasons, like going over the sidewalks, and the traffic simply doesn't know when to overtake, any of the blockings that happens, or to proceed on with their routes. NPCs don't know how to realistically respond to a crisis. These small factors affect badly into overall experience. You got this beautiful and vivid city, but the AI is so horrible they suck the life out of it. Finally, to the combat experience of the game. You simply can't play this game thinking it's a first-person game. No, it's an RPG. The weapons have levels that determines their damage output, rarities that feature special effects and such, and attachments to accompany your personal playstyle. The guns have classes such as Tech, Power, and Smart that can totally affect the combat pace and the style. For example, the Power class features guns that can penetrate through walls, and enemies won't have a clue what hit them. Smart ones can shoot at the covered enemies with their seeking bullets, and they're pretty fun to use as well. The best part about the combat is how skills and perks assist you in becoming better with specific type of a weapon. In the reflex branches, you can acquire a perk that can be improved your handguns, rifles, and blades experiences. Oh, talking about the blades. The game also features some melee weapons, and you have a full freedom to go full melee build. However, some aspects of melee combat are extremely underwhelming when comparing to the CD Projekt Red promise prior to the release. Especially Mantis blades. They're simply a pair of blades that can come out of your arms. That's pretty much it. The game has many flaws in its gameplay, and you might not be a fan of it at all, but I'm pretty sure you will forget any of that once you get to the story and the characters. This is very relatable because I almost gave up playing the game, but once I got into the story, I was attached to it. Let's start the topic by discussing the game's protagonist V, aka Valerie, or Vincent, according to the gender you'll go for. You start off your journey with a life path you choose. It kind of falls under the gameplay if you think about it. I decided to mention this in this section because the life path you choose doesn't seem to directly affect your gameplay, but gives you some additional dialogue options and special prologue. However, V and his history are extremely well written. The only complaint that I have about V is that by the time you reach the endgame, his drive to survive or to have his dream mercenary life kind of diminishes. That might not be a big deal when considering all the events that happen throughout the story. Coming to the story of the game, it is simply a roller coaster of emotions. From the start to the end, the story has hype, energy, and the X factor that keeps it interesting every second. I will leave out all the spoilers though. However, there are some complaints I have to make. In the prologue, you start with a great start and meeting several people. But the problem with the prologue is that it's simply too short, and you don't get to explore or bond with much of the amazing characters you meet. This is a place where I think they had to cut off the content, and I honestly don't know why they wouldn't let us explore more. The rest of the story I can't complain much. It really is cool how there are many epilogues you can achieve simply through the choices you make throughout the game. These choices come from various main and side NPCs. It is quite satisfying how they can become relevant to the story. Talking about the characters, you meet plenty of people that even have their own quest lines, especially romanceable characters. You meet like Panam and Judy are simply one of the best NPCs I have ever seen on the recent games. They give you the hope and life you wanted at the end of the plot, and they play major roles in the epilogue. Panam in particular is one of the best NPCs in the game. You meet her in the main quest, and you can choose to romance her. If you choose to do so, you will get and experience some truly heartwarming moments and conversations that actually make you fall in love with her. Same goes for Judy. If you follow these characters' questline, you will get an idea of how impactful even the side quests are to the main story. Even though most of them don't directly affect the story, you might still want to play them because almost all of them have unique missions, stories, and playstyles that won't get you bored. This is also a huge upside of the game, how side quests aren't repetitive as other games. For example, you come across a quest where you have to assist a depressing vending machine, another one where there's a depressing AI taxi, another one where a man with a crotch implant went horribly wrong, and just the list goes on. Breathtaking graphics and the banger tunes are probably the main reasons why anyone would keep coming back to play the game, even the haters. Night City is simply amazing in almost every way. It packs everything that Mike Pondsmith visualized in his concept: neon lights, flying futuristic cars, dystopian society that relies on the technology more than the nature, gangs that fight for their own beliefs, the mega corporations that are out there ruling them all. The city is hypnotizing with its beauty, and the people in it add more life and mysteries to it. Not only the neon light metropolis, but also the badlands around it perfectly depicts the mess of the world you get to live in. The foggy and rainy weathers give the game one aesthetic look. You'll want to stop anything you're doing and stare at it. The new engine the game is built on delivers some outstanding lighting and simulations, and these effects make one of the best looking, or probably the best looking game out there. Add some incredible tunes to its already stunning world and you get a masterpiece. The game features some of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a game that rivals to the Death Stranding soundtrack. It almost has no bad music in it. There's some songs that directly relate to the story in Johnny Silverhand, aka Keanu Reeves. One of the main characters in the game is a rock star himself. The original score and the samurai tracks are just phenomenal, and how the tracks play when you get into the combat or during a specific mission just hype up the overall experience of the game. For example, the first time you see Johnny Silverhand in the game is one of his memories. You take on enemies while the original soundtrack by the name of Rebel Path plays in the background with Johnny's revolver that has a special reloading animations, and quests like these just put up the game on top of everything else. So as we all already know, Cyberpunk 2077 is probably one of the biggest disappointments of the decade. It is mainly because of the utter mess it made with the last gen consoles. This even led them to lose huge share investors, and it truly is disappointing how CD Projekt Red straight up lied about its forehand. It might have been better if they decided to launch it as a next gen game instead, and if they had utilized all of their hours spent on the last gen consoles optimizations on a new content and polishing up the game. But this doesn't mean that the game should be hated or CD Projekt Red should be cancelled. I remember when The Witcher 3 was first released, the game was so buggy I wasn't even interested at all. Well, it's not to say I was even interested in the game, since I actually didn't like it at first, but only after when I gave the game a second chance, and of course when bugs ironed out, I got into the story of the game. I instantly fell in love with it, and it is one of my favorite games of all up to date. Same goes with Cyberpunk 2077. The game isn't a masterpiece or miraculous god-given form of art in any way like it was overhyped, especially by the fans. But it truly is a great game. The game has flaws like horrible AI, bugs, and few plot holes here and there, but also has amazing details and Easter eggs more than any recent titles. The game stood no chance of being up to the hype because it was overhyped by both parties, devs and fans to start with. I also seen people going nuts over how bad the game is and straight up hating it. I'm pretty sure these people haven't even tried playing the game properly, but maybe because they think it's trendy? I'm also pretty sure the people that rushed CD Projekt Red into releasing the game by threatening them. Another tragic thing I've seen is people comparing the game to Grand Theft Auto titles. Yes, both games look kind of similar, but Grand Theft Auto actually comes from a bigger studio with over 20 years of experience. They have more experience with open worlds, AI and vehicles, so comparing CD Projekt Red's very first take on the genre with Grand Theft Auto multiple titles and improvements does not make any sense, and it just isn't fair at all. On top of that, if you really think about it, what we have here is by far the best game for its very first attempt. In conclusion, I'd like to state the game is barely holding on because of the factors I mentioned earlier, like its narrative, characters, aesthetic and music. If they have failed in that department as well, the game would have been the biggest flop in the history of video games. The game also has amazing replay value as you can choose 2 genders, 3 life paths, several romance options, various types of ranged and melee builds, and different takes on the combat experiences, stealth or open. You can try out different endings, and this game keeps you occupied for at least a month or 2 if you decide to try them all out. I don't regret spending money on it, and I'd give this game a solid 8 out of 10 for all of its positive aspects. But what are your thoughts about this game? Did you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments. Lastly, I wish to mention that I've got a Patreon, and if you wish to support me, please do consider. Also, check out the rest of my special videos in a separate playlist. I will leave all the links down below in the description. And at that, thank you all for watching this video, like and subscribe, and have a wonderful day.